Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
Have you ever stopped to think that the loudest voice holding you back isn't the world? It's the one inside your head. The truth is, if you learn how to use your mind, not let it use you, anything becomes possible, not just success, not just wealth, but peace, clarity, courage. Let's talk about how mastering your mind can transform the way you live, love, and lead. A few years ago, I met a young woman after one of my talks. She came up to me, tears in her eyes, and said, "Brene, I feel like I'm fighting my own brain every day. I know I'm capable of more, but it's like my mind keeps reminding me that I'm not enough." I looked at her and I saw myself. Because I've been there too. We all have. There was a time in my life when I thought vulnerability was weakness. That if I could just control my thoughts, silence my fears, I'd finally find peace. But the truth is, peace doesn't come from controlling your mind. It comes from understanding it. Our minds are storytellers, constantly narrating, constantly creating meaning. And when those stories are rooted in shame, fear, or comparison, they become prisons. But when we learn to rewrite them, with compassion and courage, they become wings. Most of us don't realize how much power we've given away to our own thoughts. We wake up and before our feet even touch the floor, our minds are already talking. You're not enough. You're not ready. We carry that inner noise all day, mistaking it for truth, when in reality, it's just the voice of fear dressed up as reason. The mind is brilliant. It can imagine, create, analyze, and dream. But it can also deceive you. It can convince you that you are your pain, your mistakes, or your past. It can whisper that your worth depends on your performance, your appearance, or the approval of others. And when you believe those whispers, your life starts to shrink to fit inside the limits of your thoughts. I remember once being backstage before a big talk, feeling that tightening in my chest that always comes with vulnerability. My mind began its familiar chatter. "You're gonna mess up. They'll see you don't belong here." For a moment, I believed it, but then I caught it. I took a deep breath and said quietly to myself, "That's not the truth. That's fear talking." The moment I recognized the difference between my mind's voice and my true self, something powerful happened. I took my power back. That's what learning to use your mind looks like. It's not about silencing it. It's about listening differently. Instead of reacting to every thought as if it's a fact, you start observing it with curiosity. You start asking, is this thought helping me grow, or is it trying to keep me small? Because the mind's first job is survival, not happiness. It loves comfort zones. It loves predictability. It doesn't care about your dreams, it cares about keeping you safe. But safety and fulfillment rarely live in the same place. When you become the observer of your thoughts instead of the prisoner of them, you begin to see patterns. You notice the loops of self-doubt, the rehearsed fears, the automatic reactions. And the moment you notice, you create space, a pause between the thought and the response. That small pause is where freedom begins. Here's the truth most people don't want to admit: mastering your mind doesn't mean you'll never feel fear again. It means fear no longer drives the car. It can ride in the back seat, sure, but it doesn't get to steer your decisions or define your worth. The real work is in reclaiming authorship over what your mind tells you. When you tell yourself, "I can't," you've already closed the door. But when you shift the language to, "I'm learning how," or "I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way," the brain starts wiring for possibility. That's not wishful thinking, it's neuroscience. Thoughts repeated become beliefs, and beliefs shape your reality. So start small. Catch one negative thought today and challenge it. Replace it with a kinder one. That's how you begin to use your mind instead of letting it use you. Over time, you'll notice the noise quiet down, not because the world got easier, but because you got stronger. Your mind is a garden. Every thought is a seed. And every day, whether you realize it or not, you're watering something. The problem is, most of us are watering weeds. We feed the stories of fear, comparison, and scarcity until they take over everything beautiful trying to grow inside us. Think about how often your focus goes toward what's wrong instead of what's right. You replay mistakes. You relive moments of rejection. You compare your journey to someone else's highlight reel and wonder why you're not further ahead. It's not that you're broken. It's that your mind has been trained to scan for danger. It's a survival mechanism, an ancient part of the brain that evolved to protect us from threats. But now, in a world where most of our threats are emotional, that same mechanism keeps us stuck in cycles of worry and self-doubt. I remember when I was writing one of my early books. Every day I would sit at my desk, and instead of focusing on what I could say, my mind kept whispering what I shouldn't. It told me I wasn't as smart as other authors. It told me people wouldn't care. I would finish a paragraph and immediately judge it as not good enough. One morning, after weeks of this mental battle, I realized something powerful. My attention had become my enemy. I was feeding the fear instead of the courage. So I made a quiet shift. Before I started writing, I began listing 3 things I was grateful for. Just 3. Sometimes it was as simple as coffee, sunlight, and the sound of my kids laughing in the next room. That little ritual redirected my mind. It reminded me that I didn't have to focus on the noise. I could choose what deserved my energy. And that changed everything. What you focus on expands. When you focus on fear, it grows louder. When you focus on gratitude, peace begins to bloom. When you focus on what's possible instead of what's missing, your brain literally starts rewiring itself to see opportunities instead of obstacles. Science calls this neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to reshape itself based on experience and attention. I call it evidence that hope has a biological home. You can't stop the weeds from growing, they'll always appear. Doubt will always whisper. But you can choose not to water them. You can redirect your focus to the good, to the growth, to the grace that's already present in your life. Every time you do, you strengthen a different part of your mind. The part that believes, the part that trusts, the part that dreams. It's not about blind positivity. It's about mindful awareness. It's about saying, yes, fear is here, but so is courage. It's understanding that your attention is one of the most sacred resources you have. Wherever you place it, life follows. So ask yourself, what have you been feeding lately? Are you watering the weeds of self-doubt or the seeds of possibility? Because what you feed grows. And when you finally learn to feed your faith, your gratitude, your resilience, your entire world begins to change. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because your mind finally learns how to see beauty where it once saw limits. That's the real power of focus. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that vulnerability is weakness, that showing emotion means you've lost control, that crying, asking for help, or admitting fear makes you fragile. But the truth I've learned, both from research and from life, is that vulnerability is not weakness. It's the most accurate measure of courage. Because it takes real strength to show up when there are no guarantees. I'll never forget a moment early in my career when I was preparing for a talk that I felt deeply unqualified to give. I was terrified, heart pounding, hands trembling. I wanted to appear confident, put together, bulletproof. But my body knew the truth. My fear was loud. My mind was racing. I had a choice, either pretend I was fine or admit that I was scared. And I remember whispering to myself, you can't connect with people from behind a mask. So when I stepped on stage, I took a breath and told the audience the truth. I'm nervous. They laughed, nodded, and suddenly, the distance between us disappeared. That's what vulnerability does. It dissolves walls. It turns fear into connection. When we suppress vulnerability, we also suppress joy, love, and creativity. You can't selectively numb emotions. The more you shut down what feels uncomfortable, the more you disconnect from everything that makes life worth living. Our minds, in their effort to protect us from pain, build stories that say, don't risk it. Don't get too close. Don't care too much. But those stories are walls that keep us lonely and small. Neuroscience tells us when we express our emotions authentically, our brains actually begin to rewire. The neural pathways associated with fear and shame weaken, and those tied to empathy and trust grow stronger. Vulnerability literally reshapes the mind toward connection. It tells your nervous system, I'm safe even when I'm seen. And that's how healing begins. We live in a world that rewards perfection and performance, but our souls crave truth. Every time you allow yourself to say, I don't know, I'm hurting, or I need help, You invite honesty into the room, and honesty has a quiet power. It makes everyone around you exhale. It says, "Me too." It's the bridge between isolation and belonging. Learning to be vulnerable with yourself is the first step. It means sitting with your own feelings without judgment. It means telling yourself the truth about what hurts instead of numbing it away. Because healing doesn't happen in avoidance, it happens in awareness. And awareness, no matter how painful, is always the beginning of freedom. So many of us are walking around armored, trying to protect our hearts from disappointment. But that armor comes at a cost. It keeps out the bad, yes, but it also keeps out the good. You can't love fully if you're always guarding yourself from being hurt. The irony is, the moment you allow yourself to be seen as you truly are, messy, imperfect human, you find strength in the very place you thought you'd find weakness. Vulnerability isn't the end of control, it's the beginning of connection. It's what makes the mind quiet and the heart open. It's what turns fear into courage and shame into compassion. So when you feel the urge to hide, to run, to protect, pause. Take a breath and remind yourself, it's safe to be seen. Because that's how the mind learns to trust again, and that's how we finally come home to ourselves. Every single one of us carries a story inside. It's the quiet narrative that runs beneath our thoughts, shaping the way we see ourselves, the world, and what we believe we deserve. For some of us, it started early, the moment we failed, were rejected, or made to feel invisible. Our minds, trying to protect us, turned those experiences into stories. I'm not enough. I don't belong. I'll always be the one who's left. And then, without realizing it, we start living as if those stories are facts. I remember once sitting across from a woman during a research interview who said, "I don't think I've ever made a single brave decision." I asked her why, and she said, "Because every time I've tried to step out, something went wrong. So now I just stay safe." That was her story, and she believed it so deeply that it became the lens through which she saw her life. But the truth was, she had made dozens of brave choices, raising kids on her own, showing up for a friend in crisis, finding the strength to start again after losing everything. She just didn't see it because her story didn't allow her to. The stories we tell ourselves are powerful. They can either imprison us or set us free. The mind loves patterns, it loves to predict outcomes. So when something painful happens, the brain quickly files it away and says, "See, this is who you are. This is what happens to you." And unless we challenge it, that story becomes our identity. But here's the miracle: stories can be rewritten. We can't erase what happened, but we can change the meaning we give to it. When your mind says, "I always fail," you can pause and respond. That's not true. I've failed before. Yes, but I've also grown, learned, and tried again. That's not denial. That's authorship. You're taking the pen back. You're refusing to let your pain be the narrator. I've learned that rewriting your story doesn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It means acknowledging it with compassion and then daring to ask, what else could be true? Maybe the ending isn't failure, it's resilience. Maybe the heartbreak wasn't punishment, it was redirection. The stories we tell determine whether we live in shame or rise in grace. And sometimes the hardest story to rewrite is the one that says, "I'm not worthy." That story doesn't come from truth. It comes from old wounds that were never spoken about, from moments when you needed love and got silence instead. But worthiness isn't something you earn, it's something you remember. It's been yours from the beginning. Your job is simply to return to it. When you change your story, your world changes too. Because the brain listens, it adapts, it begins to align with the new narrative. Every time you speak kindness over yourself, every time you forgive, every time you choose courage instead of shame, you're rewriting your mind's script. So take a moment today to listen. What story have you been telling yourself about who you are? And is it still serving you? Because you are the author now, and the next chapter doesn't have to look like the last one. You can begin again. You can write something truer, softer, and more beautiful. The story of someone who decided to believe in possibility, starting with themselves. We often think that the mind is the master of our lives, that if we just think hard enough, plan carefully enough, and control enough, we can bend the world to our will. But the truth I've discovered and research confirms, is that the mind alone cannot create the life we long for. It needs the heart. The mind can map the path, but the heart fuels the journey. Without it, even the smartest plans feel hollow, and even the clearest strategies fall flat. I remember sitting in a quiet cafe years ago with a young man who was accomplished in every measurable way. He had a successful career, accolades, and a life that looked perfect from the outside. But he confessed that he felt empty. "I can make money," he said. "I can achieve anything my mind can plan, but I don't feel alive. I'm tired, disconnected, lonely." And in that moment, I realized the profound truth: intelligence, talent, and strategy are meaningless without emotional alignment. The heart is what gives our actions meaning. The mind can tell you how to climb a mountain, but the heart tells you why you're climbing it. The mind follows the heart, not the other way around. When your intentions are rooted in love, empathy, and purpose, your thoughts begin to line up. Fear becomes a guidepost rather than a roadblock. Your mind stops arguing and starts supporting. But when your actions come from fear, scarcity, or obligation, your mind works overtime to justify anxiety, doubt, and hesitation. This is why purpose is not just a motivational concept. It's neurological. The heart signals the brain signals the body, and suddenly your entire being is wired toward growth instead of survival. Think about the moments in your life when you acted out of love rather than logic. Maybe it was comforting a friend who was struggling, standing up for someone who couldn't, or choosing honesty even when it was hard. Your mind might have hesitated, calculating risk, weighing outcomes, but your heart took the lead, and afterward, you felt alive, connected, and proud. That's the mind following the heart. That's where true courage lies. Our society teaches us to measure success by achievement, output, and productivity, but those things are just byproducts. Real fulfillment comes from alignment. When your actions, your mind, and your heart are moving in the same direction. When they are, life no longer feels like a constant battle. Instead, it feels like a rhythm, a flow, a purposeful current carrying you forward. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you allow your heart to guide the mind, fear doesn't disappear, but it loses its power. Doubt may visit, but it doesn't define you. You start seeing challenges as invitations, obstacles as opportunities, and setbacks as lessons. The heart teaches the mind that life is not just about surviving, it's about being fully awake, fully present, and fully human. So today, notice where your mind is running ahead or holding back. Ask yourself, is this coming from fear or is it coming from love? When you choose to let the heart lead, the mind will follow, and suddenly, the impossible begins to feel possible. The quiet courage of aligning thought with intention is the most profound power we possess. And when you step into it, your life no longer feels like a fight. It feels like a masterpiece in progress. So today, I want you to pause, breathe, and ask yourself, am I using my mind or is my mind using me? Because the moment you choose awareness over autopilot, faith over fear, and courage over comfort, you unlock a part of yourself that's unstoppable. Remember, your thoughts create your reality. Your beliefs shape your future, and your vulnerability makes you powerful. So use your mind, don't lose it. And when your inner voice whispers you can't, answer back gently but firmly, "Oh, watch me."